Hello everybody, welcome to an ABC of ROI. This is our webinar for you. I hope you've had a lovely day today. You've done anything interesting. So it's me, Heather. I'm the director of Tau Leadership, co-founder of Tau Leadership. I'm also joined by the very wonderful, very talented Sharon Davies, who is a wonderful transformational leader that I shall introduce you to in a second. Hello, Sharon.
Hello, everybody.
Great. So we've got the next 40 minutes or so to look at how you can create the kind of ROI that really makes people stand up and take notice. So we are showing 37,000% in our most recent project. But more than that, how do you, in a relatively short space of time, fundamentally transform a culture in terms of performance, engagement, and all the fundamental narrative that goes underneath that? So we think we've got a great new process to share with you that you can also emulate. So let's have a look at our housekeeping for the next short while. So set your phases to mute, which means on this particular software, Zoom, if you could mute your video, switch your video off and mute your audio. You can also chat on the chat function with Justin, who is co-founder and director of Tau Leadership. So just any questions as we go along, please just type your questions in and Justin will do his best to answer those as well. What some of you may be able to do as well is show us a bit of love as we go through. So you might have an emoji reaction button. So you could say something is probably wonderful by showing a heart, or poop by showing a poop, or whatever you like. So keep it interactive, show us some symbols as we go through. And this webinar is live and it will also be available later on to you as a recording too. So without further ado, let's introduce myself and Sharon. So Sharon is just an exceptional person. She's out of all the professional people that I know, she has probably the most overwhelming amount of passion for people transformation, for leadership transformation, and for cultural transformation, and that's through a wealth of experience. Currently she's heading up people experience plans at NPower. And before that, previously, she was in various roles at Sky, very wonderful Sky, talent and people specialist, operational development, moving, and then running the entire Belfast contact centre as well. So she's not just a people transformation expert, she also has terrific commercial chops too. And before that, for a long time, it's the same kind of thing in EDF Energy as well. So operational, strategic training, talent development, wherever she goes, she leaves a wonderful legacy, wonderful cultural legacy there. So really would urge you to connect with Sharon on LinkedIn. You should be able to see the link there. And of course, I'm the director of Tau Leadership, one of the two directors of Tau Leadership, and also a best-selling author of Straight to Yes, available at all good bookstores. So please feel free to connect with me as well. So you've got us for the next 35 minutes or so. Let's look at our agenda. So the main question that we often get asked by our clients is, why are we still getting change wrong? Why are we still not seeing the kind of traction that we need from this huge investment of time, of energy, of focus, of finance? Why are we still getting change wrong? So we're going to look at that. Sharon's going to share her words of wisdom, of which there are many on the subject too. Then we'll look at, for what we think is a new age, a new process. When we say a new age, we're not just talking about this VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. We're also talking about digitalization, we're talking about globalization. We're talking about more Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z in the workplace. We think we have a new process that reflects that very well. And finally, we'll just contextualize the theory with a case study of one of our more recent projects at Sky PLC, which Sharon started off with us. So without further ado, I know you're busy people, you probably want to get straight into it. So here's the fundamental question: why are we still getting change wrong? It's this, 2017, we've made seismic advances in technology, in science, in understanding of people, yet fundamentally, we're still getting change wrong. Towers Watson is saying 75% of change fails to stick. McKinsey and John Cotter's research shows that 70% of change is failing, and it's failing for entirely avoidable reasons. So here's the question: why are we still getting it wrong, knowing what we know? Sharon, over to you, your thoughts.
Cool, thank you, Heather. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you, very articulate. So in my experience, there's a number of reasons why change fails, or to use your expression, why we get it wrong. And having done a number of change programs across the different organizations that I've worked in, across the different roles, and as we know, change happens every single day. But the biggest thing that happens is that change fails, not because of the initiative itself, because actually the change has been a really good idea or really exciting or is something that is absolutely needed. What happens is it changes because we fail to identify other major underlying problems. So we try to implement a change without really understanding what our foundations look like. So therefore, we're implementing a change based on or built on quicksand, because we're just not using the information that we have available to us. So we're not using the data that we've had available to us, or more importantly, we're not listening to our people and what it is they're actually telling us. So therefore, what happens is we implement a change based on unsolid foundations, and then we're not quick enough to react. So we're not agile enough to react to our people's feedback. And that's because of the way we set ourselves up, or because of the people who are leading the change on their mindset, which is, we've got a plan, we need to stick to the plan. By hook or by crook, we're sticking to it, rather than actually looking at it, reviewing it, and making a slight change that will land what we're trying to do in a much more effective way by bringing our people along with us on the journey. And I think that's all down to, mindset shifts, the clarity around the change, the capability of the actual leaders who were landing the change with, and then the commitment piece. So what we failed to do was get the commitment of our people, build the capability of our people to be able to adapt to that change, or being really clear about what it is that we need to land. And then the other thing what we do is we're looking above all the time, and we're looking upwards and saying, actually, we need to wait for someone else to tell us what to do, or that actually changes, or we believe changes top down. Where actually the most effective changes, in my experience, have happened within. So the change is radiating from the actual center of the organization. So basically, again, from our people. So it's our people that make the change happen. So there's a number of different things there around, for me, why it fails. But the one that's most interesting as well for me is a me, us and them mindset. So that whole piece around, well, I'm all right. And actually, we're all right from a team perspective. My team's all right, but it's them over there, or it's them up there. So the support functions or the actual leaders in the organization are at fault. So we're pointing the finger elsewhere and giving ourselves permission to not change or to avoid the change or resist the change because we believe that not everybody is, well, as you say, on the actual bus with us. Does that make sense, Anna?
It does, and it's really interesting. I think there's a stat that I read recently from McKinsey, love them or loathe them, that said that change that is created by the people has an impact 5 times greater than change that's created by the top, by the leaders. But when you start thinking about this cross-functional piece that you've just been talking about, you wonder how much information, how much engagement, how much data is lost when, for example, HR says, "Great, so we're running change, and we don't necessarily have to get into the bloodstream of the operation. We're just going to run this program. We don't have to get it to really bring our stakeholders in IT or IS in. We don't have to talk to finance, for example. We don't have to talk to analytics." So you think about when we're not listening to our direct reports, but we're also just not listening to the different stakeholders in the business, what we're missing. And we wonder why change fails. It's kind of, change is everybody's remit, right? It's everybody's responsibility. But too often, I think, those of us in people services just tend to crack on with it without bringing everybody else in.
Mm. And I think absolutely, and I think also there's so many change agendas going on across organisations because of that lack of collaboration or line of sight of where we're looking to move to, or that whole piece around actually what is our purpose and how do we all stay true to it. Therefore, what happens is like too much change happens and too fast. So therefore, again, there's that whole confusion or change fatigue for our people because we're not bringing them on the journey with us, or actually having the conversation with them beforehand to just really understand what it feels like for them at this moment in time.
Right, and that, as you said, in terms of commitment, that increases the commitment that different functions and our people have to the change when they feel like it's their change. It's a different game, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. I think there's another bit as well that says if you absolutely want to make a lasting change, and you want to be want our people to come with us, then you have to be willing to do what's required to make the change stick. So it's that whole piece around the telling the story, the internal communication of it, that cultural narrative piece, but also the bit that says, have we really listened to our people? Do we really understand what's going on here? Does the change match what needs to change or what our people are telling us? And then do we stay true to it? Are we role modeling all the time? Are we behaving in a way that is aligned to what it is we're looking to achieve? Are we I suppose, having the conversations about the behaviors that aren't aligned, that whole, Heather, you talked previously about counterculture pieces. So are we talking to the people and are we challenging those counterculture behaviors as well? So I think the other bit for me as well is that, when we look on the screen at the moment around that whole not understanding the data, not driving or designing our change around what our people are telling us, and that whole waiting for something else to happen, or top down, or forcing the change, or pushing the accountability out to, well, actually, I'm waiting for my senior leader to do something. What then happens is we get that whole piece of, well, if we're pushing it down, that accountability piece, or we're not setting the direction, happens to give our people permission to go, well, I just need to do my bit. And if I just do my bit, then what can I control in my bit? And then we start to micromanage the people that are in this part of the our siloed microculture that we've created. So we start to say, well, what can we control? And that's when we start to manage on KPIs and figures, rather than the whole, what's the experience like for our people and what's the experience like for our customer, and the behavioral side of it. We're far too busy looking at the output rather than the input piece.
Yep, know that one.
And then there's the old aged one around actually when I think about myths, there's the whole bit around that actually it takes 3, 5, 10 years to change a culture. So people just wait around for people to tell us what to do. So that whole bit when we say we can't change until our senior leader gives us direction, or we can't change until them over there change, or we can't change until the support functions change, because if we change, but what about all of them? So that whole bit around it, not only does it take a long time, which it doesn't, we've proven ourselves that it takes a very short amount of time to change cultures, and then the bit around actually we make things too big for people to tackle them. And what I mean by that is that in our heads, the change is too big to comprehend it, and we get overwhelmed, and therefore we then do nothing, or we go around in circles, or we procrastinate. And actually, if we break it all down and chunk it all down, that actually it's about little changes to make a big difference. It's that whole kind of little big theory around do little things every single day that'll make a big change.
So do you not think, I suppose for a lot of people listening into this, do you not think that that transformation needs to be big change with every single person clear, with a kind of a sort of a 9-month lead in, with a 12 to 18 to 24 month plan where everything's mapped out for transformation for the kind of companies that you've worked for, which are FTSE companies? Do you not think that that's still needed?
I can see why you would think that, definitely. And I think from a strategy and direction perspective, that people need to have a framework, definitely. So that whole piece around to keep us all true to our purpose. But I think actually for if you're wanting to make a big change in a small space of time, then it's little changes every single day that impact the individual. So the leaders, the individuals, therefore impacting the experience of our customers. But I can see where you're going with actually needing definitely a sense of direction and a framework about how we actually get there. But I think that we have to speak to our people and understand what they have to get that freedom within that framework.
Right. Now, I mean, it makes perfect sense, and I think part of the reason that we see things going wrong is because there's such an inordinate amount of time spent strategizing around how are we going to change. What's the change going to look like? What's the why that we communicate? Specifically, what are the milestones and activities that we bring in? And all of that is done without consultation, without consulting with the wider business to understand what people actually think, feel, and want. So yeah. that makes perfect sense.
I think the challenge around that plan, Heather, is that we create it in a room somewhere as leaders or consultants, and actually it's based on, I don't know, leadership or management hunches or the latest thinking, and then what happens is we love it so much and we're so invested in it, we forget to be agile in it at the same time. And the business is changing, and the external markets are changing so quickly. Regulators are changing, politics, all of those sorts of things impact us really quickly. And by sticking to that plan rigidly, we lose our opportunity to be agile and do what's right for our people and our customers and our business.
Yeah, and by the time you've made a plan, 3 months in, the data's different, right? But I think one of the problems that we come across quite often with our clients is when it comes to people, then people data is notoriously difficult to track and manage. I mean, behavioral data, it's easy to track KPIs, but in terms of what are the specific behaviors and socially, how are people getting work done, that kind of stuff, it's been a little bit more tricky to get to, and because the planning phase takes so long, by the time you get there, the game's different anyway, isn't it? So.
And your players are different, right? Your people are different. They move on, they change, they think differently. They're impacted by society as well. So, what's important to them could change too as they move through life as well. So you've got to make sure that absolutely you would have a framework from a business context perspective, but you've got to be agile in it.
Perfect. Okay, so let's move on with that. So again, we're moving into this new age where so many things are changing. You think about technology and the impact that technology is now having at work, pretty much everybody has a smartphone, and the ubiquity of data and privacy issues, and the world of work now is different to the world of work 10 years ago. I don't know, Sharon, if you see that in the people that you work with, but it feels fundamentally quite different to what I remember it 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we look at a lot of the change theory, we're still looking at the change theory mostly, with some exceptions, from 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And actually, we think that sucks. We think that's it's just not good enough. And we have a new process. I don't think we're 100% there yet, but I think we're probably 60, 70% there. And we would just love for everyone to co-create with us to come up with a process that keeps refining on a breakthrough we think we've made. Very simply, this is the framework that I'll jump into a little bit more detail on. 3 very clear phases that we have in our recent projects that have created just crazy results. step one is getting back to what we were talking about, is about applying some hard data to the soft issues that our clients are asking us to help with. So step one is analyze, and particularly we want to analyze the influences within the kind of the scope of the change that we're looking for. So these are the people who will disproportionately affect your change results, either make or break them. And of course, the rub of this is that mostly organizations don't know who they are. So they think they know, but they don't. So once we've identified who are the people who socially have the most capital, who will influence the change result, then step two is to bring those people into a room and really start getting some human data to apply to the hard data. And really mine those people for their insights. And here at this point, we're looking for behaviorally, what are the crucial behaviors that we want to nudge or tweak or change so that the culture moves to the desired culture, the target culture, as quickly as possible. So what we're listening for there is behaviors. And in that phase two, we're also designing what the intervention will look like. And that's stage three. We'll jump onto stage three in a little bit more detail too. But essentially what we looked at is we're obsessed with getting behavior change in the muscle as quickly as possible. So theory is great, but people walking and talking and modeling new behaviors that create a new culture is what we're about. So we looked about to say, you know, where is the fastest kind of progress in business happening? And it turns out it was in agile methodology from the world of software development. So stage three is about using agile methodology to get behaviors to where they need to be in record time. So we'll jump into those in just a little bit more detail. Sharon, you know our process well, so jump in and add wherever you would like to.
Thank you.
So we'll have a look at step one again. Step one very much is about who are the most influential people in the organization who can make or break change. So one of the things that we know is, you see a little diagram about the tipping point. Now, this has been around for 50, 60 years, but we know that in any community, there are certain people who are more innovate with behaviors, with purchases, with thinking, and each group behind tends to look at the group ahead and start modeling the way they think, the way they act, the way they dress, the medication they prescribe in some cases. And so the thinking here is to create a tipping point, which is a very famous buzzword from a few years ago, made famous by Malcolm Gladwell. To create a tipping point, we only really need about 16% of a population for everybody else to start behaving and thinking like. So we have a piece of software that's our own software called Culture Book, and it's a quick micro survey. It's 5 questions, takes 5 minutes to do, but it generates tens of millions of data points. And what that identifies for us are many things, but primarily a list of influence, a ranking of influence from most influential to least influential throughout the entire site, division, company, whoever we are studying. So we take the top 16% of those people because we know that they are the people who will create this cultural tipping point. So very, very quick survey. It's built on the same mathematics that Facebook and LinkedIn are based on, graph theory, which means that there's a good 30 years of research behind that too. Now, if you look at the top of the screen, you'll see some other really interesting visualizations and insights that come out of this phase. So these 2 separate constellations are from exactly the same company. The one on the left is one that's not particularly engaged, but it's really poorly, it's suffering from poor engagement and performing really poorly as well. The one on the right has really high engagement and really high performance. So the red one on the left, what's interesting about these actually is that both of these are exactly the same organization, saying they sell and serve on the same products, services, they have the same structure, comp and benefit, everything is the same. The only difference is location and leadership. Yet we see 2 constellations that are radically different that demonstrate how does work get done. Each dot is a person, each line is a relationship between people. And so on the left, you can see this mist of people around the outside, which shows they're not connected to anyone, no one's connected to them. They turn up, they do their job, they go home. This shows incredibly high attrition and very low engagement. You can also see that all the spikes coming off it mean that you can't clearly see teams that are working together, and all the management we know is clustered in the middle in this particular site. But if you look at the site on the right-hand side, you can see teams. You see these cohesive units where people are working well together. And if you look at about 11 o'clock on that particular diagram with the blue points, you'll see multiple teams working together incredibly cohesively, and information flowing in a very democratic way. Now, we can get from 5 simple questions, we can get a raft of visual insight and a raft of cultural insight that we can share back. But the most important thing we're looking for at this stage is who are the most influential people on site. Quite a simple process. Now, this becomes very human in the second phase. I know, Sharon, you've certainly contributed to our thinking on this. And we bring these top 16% of the influencers in small groups into a room and essentially set them up to have a conversation with each other where I'll be honest, we kind of eavesdrop. I think that's fair to say, isn't it?
Yes.
It's really important that their story comes out, and by talking to each other rather than us, their story comes out. You see the kind of the visualizations, these word clouds around the top of the screen. And again, these are the kind of visualizations that show what are they talking about in response to these different provocations or different questions that we have. What we're listening for when those guys are talking is we're listening for what are the behaviors that if we nudge them at leadership level, this will change the entire culture. So that's our job there, that's our role. I know, Sharon, when we've done that, we're constantly listening for behaviors that are explicitly offered and some that are implicitly offered too, right?
Absolutely. What I love about this this process, I'm going to call it, is that once we get these guys talking, everything else disappears. So any barriers that were up to, I'm not talking in front of these people, or I'm not sharing this, or this is, I don't feel comfortable here. It all disappears in the process that we use, that beautifully and subtly with finesse helps our people have a really great conversation about the stuff that really matters to them. But it's the stuff that they're not saying as well that we're looking for, which I think gives us lots of insight into how it feels for the people right there, right then.
And I think you've described it a few times as giving to your stakeholders. It's something that gives our people a voice.
Yes.
And it's a nice way to put it, I think. It gives the culture a voice. It allows all the stuff that is kind of implicit or being murmured around water coolers or coffee machines to become really explicit, that the organization can hear, but also leadership can pay attention to. And these are the most influential people. Now, what's really interesting is when they come into these sessions and they're told that they're influencers quite directly, even if they're not a good influence, which, let's be honest, some of our influencers are not always good influence for everybody else. They immediately, their chests puff out and they immediately become champions and evangelists for whatever the change is, even before they've heard it. So, and it's so they have a chance to be heard, to be recognised, to be recognised for the social influence that they have. But then they also become these ambassadors for change, and so as well as having being a great source of input and learning for us to understand how do we now construct a change intervention. They also become great conduits for leadership to send key messaging through back to the people, because we know the research shows that formal communication will probably only reach 25% of your workforce, but informal communication will reach 75%. So if we use both together, of course, that's the ultimate. So we have this group of people who've come in, they've shared their what's in their hearts and souls. We get some terrific, rich information which we can capture and send to the organization and leadership, but they also become these real ambassadors and evangelists for going back out there and spreading a positive change message. In terms of visualizing this gives us so much information to work with. I mean, pages and pages, hundreds of pages sometimes of information, which then we can create visualizations, rich pictures, narratives from as well, so that we get kind of one version of the cultural truth to go back out to the organization with.
The other thing what's quite neat about this as well, Heather, is that the minute you start having a conversation with these people and, really deeply listening to what it is they're actually telling us, the things start to change. They start to change naturally because they are in this place of, oh, actually someone is really listening to us. They're interested in what it is we've got to say. So therefore they start to, when they leave that room, they're already starting to have different conversations with their already formed network. So you're starting to see the change before you even implement anything.
It's brilliant, isn't it? The actual diagnostic phase is the change in many ways.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So once we've been listening to all of these people, a picture starts to emerge. And again, we're listening for behaviors that we can tweak. And that's when we jump on to stage 3, which is actually designing the intervention. Now, you'll see how quick these interventions are in a second when we share a timeline with you. But this is where we get back to sprinting and agile methodology. So the sprint essentially is, for us, the way we use it is a 2-week focus on one of those behaviors. So we don't do a 5-day leadership program where people forget everything when they walk out. We focus on micro behaviors. So it might be, in a recent case, a subset of engagement, or a subset of time management, or a subset of coaching. So a very small behavioral set that we do 2 weeks on. Now, everybody at leadership and second line leadership level, because we focus on leaders, so it doesn't take forever to do, they're taught how to run sprints. And a sprint is a 2-week process where they have probably a half-day development session, training session at the beginning on that specific crucial behavior. And then for the next 2 weeks, they just do business as usual, but they focus everything through the lens of this crucial behavior. They do a daily stand-up with their team every morning for 15 minutes, whether that's on conference call or face-to-face, where essentially the team has, everybody gets to talk, everybody must talk, and in that 15 minutes, each person answers, what did I learn from practicing this behavior yesterday? What am I going to do with this behavior today specifically? And the third, so what am I going to try with this behavior today? And the third question is, how specifically am I going to apply that this behavior to that context? So 3 questions. Everybody gets a minute or so to talk. What happens is you get instant accountability for that behavior because it's public. You get great ideas being shared and people saying, wow, that's I hadn't thought of that. Let me try that too. So the leader is taking notes and checking in and seeing how people are progressing with their ideas or commitments. And then through that 2 weeks, they are literally just doing business as usual. So for those of you who are fans of 70-20-10, this is major. This is probably 80, 15, 5. I had to do maths quite quickly there. 80, 15, 5. So the sprint means they are, short development session, then absolute focus on business as usual whilst practicing that behavior and talking about how they are getting on with that behavior. Now, what we see is that this gets into the muscle far quicker than anything else we've done. And we also have our team and the client's team there coaching, supporting, role modeling, where people need a role model and a demonstration again, to make sure that, we really just get it in the muscle. And you can see some photos on this screen of what it looks like. They're not dry sessions. These are kind of high energy, brain friendly practice sessions where we practice the skill and sprinkle it with a little bit of theory. So usually we go for about 3 sprints, sometimes 4, and that means after 3 lots of 2 weeks or 4 lots of 2 weeks, the key crucial behaviors that we needed to change to tip the culture in the direction that we want are now in place for most of the people, certainly enough to create a tipping point of moving that culture in the way we want. And I have to say, having kind of discovered or stumbled across this, I'm not really sure if we would do anything else for the foreseeable future as a way to change behavior. This is really something quite special, I think we've come across. So again, they're the 3 steps that we use and stick to pretty much now. So step 1 is analyze using our culture book software, find out who the influencers are, bring them in for step 2, really mine them for insights and create that narrative and design the sprints for step 3, which can be done in a very, very small amount of time. Sharon, anything else to add to that process?
No, I think you've articulated it beautifully. Thank you.
Bless you. So this is the timeline. Now, what you'll see in blue is the diagnostic phase. Really, this is phases 1 and 2. What I really want to draw your attention to is when we look at the actual intervention. So when if you say, what will my leaders start seeing? When will they start seeing some action, some intervention? Let's look at that at week 1. By the time we get to week 10, we're done. So we're really looking at about 6, 7, 8 weeks where the actual intervention takes place. And then as a team, as Team Tau, we can literally just step away and leave the methodology there just ticking along, and there's a brand new methodology for our clients to take and add a new sprint to, which they do, and that's it. So, you know, it's really sustainable. We teach them how to fish rather than giving them a fish. And within 8-10 weeks, that methodology is there, and you've run 3 sprints, and then you can look at embedding. I have to say, in the clients that we've done this with, we've probably started, week 1, week 2, where we've actually started seeing results, because the energy, the feel of it is different, the purposefulness of it is different. I think that's one of the things that we've noticed really has to go hand in hand with this, is, Sharon, you talked about this before, which is commitment to the change. And I think it's really important that the senior leaders are committed enough to this change that they create space for people to practice new behaviors, to try new ways of working, that they're kind of being cheerleaders as well, but they're also holding people accountable to working in a new way. So what we've seen instantly with this is we see the culture starts becoming really dynamic. People start feeling really enabled, really empowered. And again, within 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, we're starting to see huge results. So just before we start wrapping up, we'll jump on to some real data. This has come back from one of our clients. This is Sky. This was for a 1,000-seat contact center that was really struggling. It was probably number 10 out of 10 in terms of site performance and engagement, a strategic risk, and big enough so that when it had a bad day, the entire business had a bad day. So this was the challenge. And actually, you see, after 6 months, starting from kind of 1 o'clock, we'll go clockwise, we saw that Net Promoter Score had jumped 57 points. Attrition had dropped 30%. We had generated together another 45 full-time employees, more or less, through the short-term absence, which is a great indicator for engagement. And then when engagement was remeasured, again, we saw it had gone up nearly four times, which is extraordinary. Number 1 site now instead of number 10, and at 6 months mark, the ROI was over 37,000%, so over 30 million. Now that was probably about 6 months ago. We know that the results are still increasing. So the results are still increasing, and this gets back to what we said before about having a sustainable methodology that you can put in place, that when the consultants step away, that the people can own, still feel as their own, and can still improvise on, can be agile with. So pretty interesting results. All done by our clients and the beautiful Team Tao here. We've got a wonderful international team of very interesting people, many authors, lots of master's degrees, a few doctors in there too, and a lot of fun. Do a lot of laughing, don't we? And so that's pretty much it. So in terms of thinking about why does change keep failing, what is potentially a new process for a new age, which is the 3 steps that we're using with our clients now that they're loving. By the way, this process is up for about 6 national and international awards this year as well. So it's really starting to capture people's imagination. We have an offer for you because it's something a little bit different. We're giving away 3 of what we call our Culture Book Network studies. So these are valued at many thousands of pounds each. We'd like you to test drive it as a proof of concept, but only for your top 30 leaders. But we only have 3 to give away, purely down to resource, and it is first come, first served. So if you're interested to see how work really gets done at the top, where the informal influence actually lies, and get a whole load of data which will show you some very interesting visuals and some great actionable insights that can be used for so many different ways. I mean, we could easily get 15, 20 insights out for coaching, diversity, talent, org change, much more. Then we're offering 3 of those as first come, first served offer to do, likely in January. So get in touch, connect@talleadership.co.uk. When they're gone, they're gone. Apologies about that if you're seeing this webinar slightly later and they've gone already. But that's it. So Sharon, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective as a client. Do you have any final thoughts about change and how we can make it better?
Thank you, Hedda. Sorry, I was just saying myself off mute. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. I think it is, as you say, it's as simple as an ABC.
Lovely.
Thank you.
So change is broken, but I'm sure we can fix it together. So thank you so much. Get in touch with us, connect@talleadership, and hopefully we'll speak very soon.